The other page. Okay, stop it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm going to present my PowerPoint on the use of personality assessment in employment decisions by me, Jacqueline Garcia Fernandez, for the class tests and measurements for Dr. Mendelson, due June 28, 2026. So today I'm going to be talking about how personality assessments and how they're used in employment decisions. Most of us have probably heard about personality assessments, and some of you have probably even taken one before. But what a lot of people don't realize is that many companies actually use these tests when they're deciding who to hire. So today I'm going to explain why employers use them, what the research says, and some of the advantages and concerns that come with them. So the first question is, what are personality assessments? Basically, it's a test that's designed to understand someone's personality traits. Things like whether they're organized, outgoing, calm under pressure, or enjoy working with other people. A lot of companies like to use these because they want to get a better idea of how someone might behave at work, especially in some certain situations or in some certain workplaces. Obviously, a resume tells you about someone's work experience, and an interview tells you pretty much how they present themselves. But a personality assessment gives employers like another look at the person. And it's important to remember that these tests shouldn't make the hiring decision on their own, that they're just one little piece of a puzzle that you have to put together. Personality assessments are described as standardized psychological tests that are designed to measure personality traits. These assessments are frequently used during recruitment and employee development. These tests help employers predict workplace behavior, and the main idea of these tests is to complement interviews and other selection methods instead of replacing them. Most of the time, these tests are added towards the end of an interview or a job application. Next is, why do employers even use personality tests? Hiring someone is expensive. A lot of companies spend a lot of time and money recruiting, training, and onboarding new employees. If they hire the wrong person, that's a huge cost to the company. They're hoping these assessments will help bring them to people who do well in the job, that work well with others, and they stick around instead of quitting after a few months or sometimes even a few days. Some employers also use personality tests to identify people who might become good leaders later on. These are some common personality assessments that I have found. There are a lot of different personality tests out there, but they're definitely not all created equal. The one researchers trust the most is called the Big Five Personality Inventory because it's been studied for decades, and that's the one that's most popular. A lot of you have probably heard of the Myers Briggs test before. It's also really popular online and in workplaces, but researchers actually don't think it's the best choice for hiring because the results aren't always consistent. Other assessments like the Hogan and the DISC are commonly used in businesses as well, but these are mainly used for leadership development and teamwork. The Big Five, like I said, is probably the number one, the most popular. Um, it's the most important model to know because it's the one that has most research. It looks at five basic personality traits. It has the famous OCEAN acronym. Openness is described as basically how creative or open people are to new experiences. Conscientiousness is how organized, responsible, and dependable the new employee will be. Extroversion is how outgoing and social the person is. And then agreeableness is about being cooperative and easy to work with. And emotional stability or neuroticism is really about how well someone handles stress and emotions. But out of all these, I think conscientiousness is usually the strongest predictor of how someone would do at a new job. I did find a lot of research that does support personality testing. So the big question is, does research actually support using personality tests? Yes, but to a limit. Researchers have found that conscientiousness employees tend to perform better because they're reliable and organized. People who are emotionally stable often handle stressful situations better. And if you're hiring for jobs like sales or like management jobs, being more outgoing can definitely be helpful. You don't want somebody who's shy in a job that you have to be direct and talk to people all the time. But also, personality isn't everything. Someone can have the perfect personality and still not have the skills or experience to do the actual job. And then, like every test, there's advantages and disadvantages. Um, for the advantages, they can help make uh, better hiring decisions. They can also reduce turnover because employees whose personalities fit the job tend to stay longer. These tests can also help improve teams and improve team capability because managers get a better idea of how different personalities might work together. And in the long run, hiring the right people saves companies a lot of money. And then these are the some of the disadvantages I found of personality assessments. A lot of people also think that these are some limitations. They're not really disadvantages. But of course, personality tests are not perfect. And one big one that I found is that people sometimes answer the questions the way they think employers want them to answer instead of answering honestly, which leads to a fake response. Another issue is that culture can affect how people understand certain questions. So the results aren't always completely fair and honest. And then some people's personalities can change over time, especially after major life experiences. You might not be the same person you were last year because of something that might have happened to you in your life. And then that's why experts say personality assessment should never be the only thing that employers use when they're making hiring decisions. Okay, and then I found some legal and ethical things that you have to keep in mind uh, and consider when it comes to personality tests. Whenever companies use these personality tests, they also have to think about the legal and ethical side of stuff. And then the tests have to be related to the job, and they can't unfairly discriminate against certain groups of people. Companies also need to protect applicants' privacy because these assessments collect personal information, and basically, employers need to make sure they're using these tests fairly and responsibly, and they need to be careful with the privacy of the applicants. Another important issue that I found within personality tests is fairness and diversity. Not everyone has the same background or culture, so people might interpret questions differently. There's language barriers, uh, and just cultural differences just really make a difference when people are taking any type of test. And if a test consistently puts certain groups at a disadvantage, then that could be a legal and ethical problem. And that's why companies should regularly evaluate their assessments to make sure they're fair for everyone that's taking these tests. So a lot of people like to compare personality tests uh, to cognitive ability tests. Personality and cognitive ability tests measure, you know, completely different things. Personality tests look at how someone usually behaves. Cognitive ability tests measure things like reasoning, learning, and problem solving. But research shows that using both together gives employers the best picture of a candidate because one measures personality and then the other one just measures ability. Um, However, personality tests should be combined with cognitive tests. And then I found some best practices for employers. If a company decides to use personality assessments, there are some things they should always do. They should use tests that have actually been backed up by research, not just random quizzes that they find on the internet. They should have to use validated assessments. Managers should also be trained on how to interpret the test correctly, and how to interpret the results correctly. And companies should always protect applicants' privacy. And then I found some future trends that stood out to me. The way companies are now using personality assessments, it's changing pretty quickly. As far as being on the job hunt, I have noticed a lot of remote hiring and AI being used now, especially when it comes to hiring and looking for a new job. AI is definitely becoming a bigger part of hiring, and some companies are even using games instead of traditional personality questions. Um, Technology is making these assessments more advanced, but it also raises questions about privacy, bias, and whether AI should really be making decisions about people's careers or just a basic job that they're looking for. And this is my conclusion that I made. So to wrap everything up, I believe that personality assessments can definitely be useful, but they need to be used the right way. Research supports using them, especially when it comes to predicting things like reliability and teamwork, and overall how the person will be at work and their performance. But they should not replace interviews or experience or overall just meeting the person and having a face to face conversation with them. The best hiring decisions come from looking at the whole person instead of just relying on one test. And then these are my references. Finish.